This government has been looking around to give away labour market protections wherever it can by sort of executive prerogative, and that's how it's used trade agreements. ISDS is crazy, and I'm glad that Labor for some considerable time has committed to getting rid of ISDS arrangements where they exist and ensuring that we never enter into them. Why should foreign countries have rights foreign companies have rights that Australian companies don't have? Why should foreign companies be able to bring legal action against Australian government policy? And the lack of understanding about ISDS is astounding. I think it was the member for North Sydney before who claimed that we'd won the case against Philip Morris that they brought under the obscure Hong Kong investment agreement, that we'd won that case and it showed that the ISDS mechanisms are fine. We didn't win the case. It was put aside as a matter of standing or some sort of jurisdictional technical. The actual substance of the case under that ISDS clause was never tested. We had a lawyer appear before the J. Scott who actually acts in this place, and he acted for Philip Morris. It seemed to me, I mean, I put it to him, that if they'd had the opportunity to have the case heard on its merits, the substance of it tested, that they may well have won. And he seemed to suggest that he thought that was probably true. When I asked him how sensible it was to have foreign multinationals going around the world, essentially affecting the democratic processes and the sort of the sovereign rights of nation states, he said, well, you know, the world's evolved. I mean, nation states themselves aren't that old. Once upon a time, there weren't nation states. We've had nation states for a while. Now we have global multinationals. Maybe that's the next shift. You know, he said, why is it that parliaments? He said, you're a parliamentarian. You've got an interest in retaining the sort of decision-making power in these matters, but that's because you're a parliamentarian. Who's to say that global multinationals aren't in a position to make policy for all of us on this planet better than parliaments? I mean, what an astounding, frightening view that is. But that's what ISDS mechanisms potentially hold for us. And remember that while Philip Morris was bringing that case against Australia, that cost us millions and millions of dollars to see through, New Zealand did not go ahead with its own plain packaging arrangements because it didn't want to be exposed to the costs that would occur if the ISDS tribunal had found in Philip Morris's favour. So for several years, an incredibly valuable public health policy measure that New Zealand was looking to introduce, following from the pioneering work here in Australia, was held up because of that chilling effect that happens when multinationals roam the earth using these ridiculous tribunals to sort of have their way over the legitimate processes and the proper decision-making and legal frameworks that democracies put in place. The last thing I'll point out is there are some sort of ticking time bombs within the TPP-11. The US is not in the agreement, but they could come back into the agreement. And if they did, one of the things that they would insist upon is monopoly right protections for biologic medicines. That's the other thing you've got to remember about trade agreements. Those who of the sort of the laissez-faire free marketeer persuasion should remember that a lot of the things that go into these agreements are not about making economic activity more free and less fettered. They're about protecting vested interests. The United States wants greater monopoly rights protections for biologic medicines because its big pharmaceutical companies want to be able to charge more money for those rights for as long as they possibly can. And we committed, in effect, to extend those monopoly protections from 5 to 8 years. That would have a cost to the PBS of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And that is something that could occur if the US comes back into the TPP-11. So let's not ever, in this place, get into that kind of black and white, good cop, bad cop, you know, we're for trade, you're not for trade kind of rubbish. These agreements are incredibly important. They should be looked at much more closely. We should be able to be much more forensic in how we look at them. But if that's to occur, the process has to change. We need independent modelling. We need stakeholder engagement. We need the government to listen to the JSCOT when it makes recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The debate is interrupted in accordance with Standing Order 43, and the debate may be resumed at a later hour. Are there any statements by honourable members? And I call the member